Tuesday, April 14th, 2026, AGNDD Intelli Report topic. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is now home to dozens of species of life, prompting debate over cleanup efforts. Please pardon any visual and informational inaccuracies in this partially AI-generated article-based video. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is now so large it is home to dozens of species of life, prompting debate over cleanup efforts. By Eric Rawls, Earth.com staff writer, April 12, 2026. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch, April 12, 2026. When we picture the open Pacific, we imagine endless blue water and not much else. Marine researchers, however, are now seeing something very different. Places like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, where plastic waste has built a kind of artificial shoreline far from any land. In the North Pacific subtropical gyre, the huge rotating current system between California and Hawaii, floating objects tend to get trapped instead of drifting away. That's where you find what people commonly call the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, a region that now holds tens of thousands of tons of plastic pieces sturdy enough to move around the ocean for years at a time. Old ideas about offshore life? For a long time, biologists treated coastal waters and the open ocean as two separate neighborhoods. Coastal species were expected to stay on rocks, piers, and shorelines, while pelagic species were the ones that belonged offshore. People knew that a storm could knock a log or a raft of seaweed loose and carry coastal organisms away from land. But the usual assumption was that those passengers would eventually die because conditions in the open ocean were too harsh. A big clue that this view was incomplete came after the Great East Japan Tsunami. The huge waves ripped loose docks, boats, and many plastic objects and sent them drifting into the Pacific. For years afterward, pieces of that debris landed on beaches in North America and Hawaii. When scientists checked those objects, they found that many Japanese coastal species had stayed alive on them for at least 6 years as they crossed the ocean. That led to a new question. Were these coastal species only passing through the open ocean, or were they beginning to form more permanent communities there? Studying the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. To explore that question, scientists joined research cruises to the eastern side of the gyre. Standing on deck, crew members watched the sea surface and picked out plastic items at least 6 inches, 15 centimeters long. In the end, they brought on board 105 pieces of floating plastic, including bottles, buoys, crates, nets, ropes, and buckets, along with a wild card group of especially life-covered objects. Every item was labeled, photographed, and tagged with its position before being set aside for careful study back in the lab. Back in the laboratory, taxonomists went through each piece of plastic and looked for invertebrates, animals without backbones. They found a wide variety of creatures such as barnacles, crabs, amphipods, bryozoans, hydroids, and sea anemones. Altogether, they identified 46 different kinds of invertebrates from 6 major animal groups. Of those 46, 37 were coastal species and 9 were pelagic, which means roughly 80% of the diversity on the debris came from coastal organisms. Life in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. When the team checked the plastic, almost every piece they had picked up was carrying life, mostly invertebrates. Invertebrates were present on 98% of the objects. Pelagic species showed up on more than 94% of the pieces, and coastal species on a bit over 70%. Many items hosted both coastal and pelagic species at the same time, so these very different organisms were sharing the same floating islands in the middle of the ocean. On average, each plastic item carried about 4 to 5 kinds of organisms, and coastal species were slightly more common than pelagic ones. Nets and ropes tended to have especially dense communities, probably because their many strands and small spaces offered plenty of places to hang on and hide. Life cycles on plastic. One of the biggest questions was whether coastal organisms were just temporary passengers on the plastic or whether they could live out their whole life cycles there. The team looked for evidence of reproduction and growth. They searched for brooding females. Females carrying eggs or young in several crustacean groups such as amphipods and crabs. And they did find them. They also saw reproductive structures on hydroids. The scientists also measured individual animals and noted the range of sizes on each piece of debris. On some species of sea anemones and amphipods, they saw tiny juveniles, medium-sized individuals, and full-grown adults, all living together on the same plastic surface. That pattern suggests that new generations were growing up on these rafts instead of all arriving at the same time from the coast. Great Pacific Garbage Patch categories types of marine debris collected for analysis from the eastern North Pacific subtropical gyre. From top left, buoy, float, jug, bucket, fragment, eel trap, cone, household items, bottle, wild card, rope, crate, and net. Inset table depicts the sample size hash per category. Photos courtesy of the Ocean Cleanup. Credit, Nature Ecology and Evolution. Why some life thrives on plastic. To understand why some species handle this lifestyle better than others, the researchers looked at traits that might be useful on a plastic raft. They noted whether adults stayed fixed in place, sessile, or could move around. And they recorded how each species fed, for example, by filtering particles from the water, grazing on surfaces, hunting prey, or using more than one of these methods. Many of the coastal species living on the plastic were able to reproduce asexually, essentially cloning themselves. Their larvae also did not need to spend much time drifting freely in the water. Young animals could grow right on the same surface as the adults. That kind of life cycle fits well with a small, isolated raft of plastic that slowly circles within the gyre. Trash type and timing. Interestingly, pelagic communities were strongly linked to the type of plastic object, while coastal communities were more tied to when the debris was collected during the cruises. The researchers then compared these gyre communities with earlier work on debris from the 2011 tsunami. Many of the coastal species found on plastics in the gyre had also been seen on Japanese tsunami debris that later washed ashore in North America and Hawaii. However, the groups that were most diverse were not exactly the same, and some coastal groups, such as mollusks, were much less common in the gyre. Overall, the gyre debris supported fewer species than the tsunami debris, and the researchers' analyses suggested that there are probably still coastal species living on plastics in the gyre that scientists have not yet recorded. Great Pacific Garbage Patch lessons. Taken together, these results point to the rise of a neo-pelagic community in the open ocean, where neo means new and pelagic refers to life in the open sea. This neo-pelagic community includes both the usual pelagic rafters and coastal species that can now survive far from land because plastic items act as durable homes. In the past, one big reason coastal species stayed near shore was the lack of long-lasting, floating, hard surfaces in the open ocean. Human-made plastics have changed that by adding countless new floating islands for coastal life in waters that used to be almost entirely pelagic. Plastic pollution is, therefore, not only an eyesore or a trash problem, it also shifts where marine life can live and allows coastal organisms to survive, reproduce, and spread across huge distances. This discovery may reshape marine ecosystems and species ranges around the world. The full study was published in the journal Nature Ecology and Evolution.
Thank you for watching this AGNDD Intelli report, dear viewers. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell button to get notified during new uploads. And make sure to tune in next time. Stay safe and healthy. Cheers!